I'm the director of the Sydney Knowledge Hub. We're a space that supports research commercialization here at the University of Sydney at the Merriweather Building, just on City Road and Butlin on the Darlington campus. On site, we run a co-working space. So we have about 22 companies that operate out of this space with a lot of people like you on the call. So early stage startups led by current researchers here at the University of Sydney and also industry partners of the university. We also run programs like the inventor mentoring programs and a lot of events like these where we're exposing research teams and early stage businesses to the funding, the people, and other opportunities to bring their products to market. So welcome to the Biosciences Fund information session. Carla Perez Romero and I put this session together pretty quickly after seeing the scheme released. It's based on the Physical Sciences Fund, which we love, and we'd love to see as high of a participation from the USyd community as possible. I believe the Chief Scientist's Office is going to do kind of a general information session on the new fund, but we wanted to do one here for the University of Sydney community to get more people here, but also having kind of a smaller group, you're able to ask a little bit more questions. But really it's about, in the last kind of 18 months, we've had these two different ways that the University of Sydney has benefited from this fund. One is from a startup that doesn't have an IP relationship with the university. You'll hear from Lewis in a little bit. And one from an industry collaborator of a researcher here. So while this fund, the primary applicant is for a venture, an industry partner, that should, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for researchers on this call if they have an industry partner. So Carla, if you wouldn't mind just popping up the agenda real quick. So here is the agenda for the next hour or so. So first we have Pro Vice Chancellor Research Enterprise, Professor Julie Kearney, who's going to intro on the session and why this fund is important. The Knowledge Hub is kind of out of her team. We have Jaren Kailath from the New South Wales Chief Scientist's Office, who will give us the ins and outs of the grant. And we very kindly have Lewis Collins, who was one of the first members of the Sydney Knowledge Hub. They outgrew the space recently, but he's a CEO and founder of BioScout, who was a startup that was born kind of on campus here at the university that received the Physical Sciences Fund. And we thought that, hearing about his experience and how it's benefited BioScout would be nice to share with you. So we'll open up the floor for questions at about 1:30. We do have a pretty big sized group, so I'm not sure if we'll, pop them in the text box. I might call on you to say them out loud, but remember, please keep your mic on mute. And so before we get into the details of the info of the Biosciences Fund, Julie Kearney will talk about why this grant matters. Julie.
Thanks, Rupal. It's good to see so many people here, and thanks, Rupal and Carla, for pulling this information session together. So as Rupal mentioned, this New South Wales Biosciences Fund is based on the success of the Physical Sciences Device Fund, which has been run for the last couple of years by the New South Wales State Government from the Office of the Chief Scientist and Engineer. And that in turn was based on the Medical Device Fund and its success. And these have proven to be really good funds in order to help to commercialise ideas. So the university is super keen to maximise the number of really high quality applications that come from our own startups, from our collaborators, and of course from the Sydney Knowledge Hub members. And it's really consistent with our initiative at the moment under the new strategy to place a focus on enterprise and commercialisation. The fund can, and you'll hear all about it from our speakers, but you can get up to $500,000 to commercialise research and development, and it's non-dilutive, which is good. And there are 3 priority areas: agriculture and agri-food, medical and life sciences, and clean energy and waste. And those are very nicely consistent with areas of strength and priority for the University of Sydney. So really nicely aligned with what we're wanting to see happen in commercialisation of our research. As you'll hear, the lead application has to be a business entity. University applicants are encouraged to participate in collaboration with business entities, but that business entity can be a startup that comes out of the university. It could be somebody that our researchers are collaborating with. In previous years, we've had a really great project funded by researchers in electrical engineering as an example. So we don't have them speaking today, but Yonghui from electrical engineering has been working on this long-range Wi-Fi technology together with Branca. And they are working with a company called Rubach, who are looking at building a prototype to use in the mining industry. So that's a really nice example of where it's a university industry collaboration based on our research activity. There are, of course, other different models by which companies can apply. The projects do need to be already at proof of concept stage. So the aim here is to take something that is at proof of concept stage and develop it into being proven in the environment. So that's TRL3 through to TRL7. And you're going to hear more about all of that from our two great speakers. So, of course, we've got Jay Rin from the Office of the Chief Scientist and Engineer and the famous Lewis Collins from BioScout. And I think the best way to hear about these programs, of course, is to hear firstly, how the aims of the program from the funder's perspective, and also, of course, from people who've been through the program themselves. So I'll leave you with that, and I hope you'll find it useful. And I'm looking forward to seeing the applications that come through this year.
Thanks, Julie. And thanks for, with the Physical Sciences Fund, we've held an information session the last couple of years, and it's been really helpful at encouraging people to come. So thanks for suggesting that. Jaren, over to you for an overview of the grant and what the assessment panel is looking for.
Thanks, Rupal, and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks, Rupal and Carla, for organizing this, and Julie for the introduction. So I'll just share my screen, and Rupal will just ask for confirmation that it's come through. Sorry.
It's okay.
We'll just quickly.
There we go.
Is that full screen?
It is.
Excellent. So I'll just quickly switch off my video. Okay, all right. Thanks, everyone. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of all the lands we have gathered from today. I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. So a quick snapshot of what the Office of the Chief Scientist does. So we are involved across a lot of programs, but as you can see, we are quite involved in the translation and commercialization sector, particularly supporting spin-out, scale-ups, and small to medium enterprises. Apart from all of this, we also conduct a lot of independent reviews, which is another of the office, and so another responsibility of the chief scientist and engineer. So the key program that I wanted to focus on today is, again, under the Future Economy Fund, which was announced by the government last year. There's the Commercialization Pathways Program, under which there were 3 programs that were announced. So the BSF has been around since 2019, but the $10 million fund, where up to last year it was $5 million, and then the new Biosciences Fund, both of which I'll be covering today in my presentation. The QCCF, the Quantum Computing Commercialization Fund, was just for a single round, and that was run earlier this year, and you'll be hearing soon about it shortly when they announce the recipients. Okay, so moving on to the Biosciences Fund and the Physical Sciences Fund. Again, Rupal, if I'm not clear, if my connection goes bad, please let me know. And
no problem. You sound great.
Excellent. So as I've already covered, the Physical Sciences Fund has been $5 million since 2019 to 2022. And the key difference between the Physical Sciences Fund and the Biosciences Fund, or the PSF and the BioSF, not just in the area that it covers. So the PSF covers physical science and engineering sectors, whereas biosciences, with this year, we are getting an understanding of how it will look like, but essentially it will cover synthetic biology, biotechnology, biomanufacturing, genetic engineering. I'll go into detail pretty soon in another slide, and the funding ask is the same. You can ask from 200,000 to 2 million for an application, and regardless of the amount you ask, you need to justify why you're asking for that amount and what it will be used for. And again, going back to what I stated earlier, the key difference is for the PSF, it covers mostly devices and systems, whereas the BioSF, the scope is larger because we understand that you'll be covering products, processor, or services as part of the application. So why these programs have been really attractive to startups and the industries because of the benefits that it offers. So and this is the same across both the programs. So the first one is that there's no matched funding requested. So for some federal government grants and certain state government grants, they ask, okay, how much will you be contributing either in kind or in cash? Here we're not requesting or asking for any information about that. We do not want you to match funds. So you can, if you're asking for 2 million, we don't need to see any evidence that, okay, you're going to drop 2 million into the program as well. The second one is, again, with the amount of funding that you're getting, particularly in the startup sector, if you go to a VC or an angel investor, typically, they ask for either an ownership stake or a seat on board or some sort of control they can have in the company. Whereas, again, with the New South Wales government, for the kind of money we are putting into the program and for the kind of for the area of your development where we are participating in, we do not ask for any of that. Repayment obligations are obviously there. However, they are tied to commercial success. I'll elaborate on that in a second. And finally, another benefit is that you do get all the amount out in a single tranche after you enter into a contract, should you be a funding recipient. With regards to the repayment obligations, so it is based on, it will be covered in your contract, but it's based on the cumulative EBITDA, which is earning before interest, taxation, depreciation and amortization. And so there's a minimum threshold value of 500,000 that is set. And that is only when you start raising money, earning income through the success of the project after commercialization. So if we give you $1 million this year, and then in Series A funding, you raise, $3 million or $40 million, we don't say, hey, why don't you give us that money back, the 1 million we gave? We, in fact, support and encourage you to continue raising funds, as that shows that there's a lot more confidence in your company as you move along in this journey. And finally, you're welcome to apply again in future rounds. If you were a successful applicant, you need to demonstrate that you have completed the project milestones that were set out in your original application. And if you're an unsuccessful applicant in this year and you're applying again next year, you just need to show progress, how much further you've come along. And one of the key ways to do that would be to get feedback from us after you get informed that you've been successful, just because you'll get key expert opinion on your application and what they thought of where you are in your current situation. So these are the companies that the PSF has supported in the past 4 years. Again, BioScout, we know all about it. So and Lewis will be speaking on it in a few minutes. And Rubak, again, Julie covered this briefly, but Rubak was the lead applicant, and they are ably supported by Professor Yongmi and Professor Branka Vucetich, who bring that expertise. And that would be one way that, and I would strongly encourage you to ask your industry partner to apply for an application, and they will be the main applicant because they will satisfy the requirements as laid out here, where they are based and headquartered in New South Wales and a company with an ABN. However, as you can see from the fourth dot point, if you are applying, if you are a university applicant and you are applying, you just need to show that you are planning to spin out, because the contract will be only signed with the spin out. So once that process is over, should you be successful, we will wait for the spin out process to be complete, and then we'll enter into a contract with you. Like I said, particularly for university applications, I would encourage that, You put in a joint application where the main applicant is a company with an ABN based and headquartered in New South Wales. I believe all of you are aware about the technology readiness level scale. So it has to be at a minimum of 3, which is where you have a basic prototype. You can see the scale in detail in our website when you go look at the guidelines of the application form. And obviously the funding can be used for a multitude of activities, prototyping, manufacturing, IP, regulatory approvals, external expertise, special equipment, all of that. Just quickly on the application process. So this year onwards, it will be launched only via Smarty Grants administration system, and the information will be treated as confidential, but you need to identify that, because should you be successful, we will be, informing the general public on what kind of technology you are a part of. And the application must be authorized by the lead applicant, and late submissions are not generally considered unless you provide, a key reason why your application was late, and even then, it has to satisfy probity requirements. All applicants, whether you are successful or not, will be notified of the outcome. And if you are aware of, if you personally know an expert panel member or a subcommittee member, please do not contact them. Even if you do, they will tell you that all inquiries need to come directly through to the OCSC. At the assessment process, the second aspect of it is there's 2 stages. So stage 1 is where I believe which would be the hardest, because that's where most of the applications will not cross that stage 1 section. But if you are successful in crossing that area, you will be invited to make a full application. And again, just on that, we do have an independent financial advisor and probity advisor who will be monitoring the program and providing expert advice to the panel. 35% of the weightage goes to innovation, 35% for commercialization, and 30% for deliverability. And you can see the criteria description and the questions here, but again, they are available on our website when you download the guidelines or preview the application form. But what I'd like to focus on, particularly for university applicants, is that from my 4 years of experience, I always see that, particularly with university applicants, the innovation aspect of the application is really strong, because you know the ins and outs of your device or system so perfectly that it is very clear that you have a great idea and you put so much information into it. But then compare to that, the commercialization aspect of it and the deliverability aspect of it sort of flounders a little bit in a way, because it just becomes clear that the applicant perhaps hasn't put enough thought, or perhaps hasn't assembled a team with the kind of relevant expertise into it, or perhaps hasn't done enough customer engagement or competitor analysis to understand what the market is. And that works against the applicant, because the subcommittee members and expert panel members really know most of these industries really well, and they immediately can see gaps in your application, and they highlight this as part of the assessment. This is the timeline. Unfortunately, with the Physical Sciences Fund, we haven't been able to announce it with the impending elections, but we're hopeful that we'll get to announce it soon. But the overall process typically takes about 9 months from start to finish. The key point here is that for those who are interested, the Biosciences Fund applications will close on the 20th of March. Please make sure that you submit it before 10 a.m. Finally, with regards to the application, if you're considering, is my application eligible? Do I have the right application? There are 2 areas where you'll be prompted, and this is a requirement as per the guidelines. One is the development framework, and the other is the 20-year R&D roadmap. So you'll be asked, for instance, what priority industry does your application fall under? For BioSF, it will be either, Julie has already covered this, agriculture, medical and life sciences, clean energy, and for the PSF, you can see on the screen here. And the second part will be what sector or technology theme does this fall under, and you'll have to tick the relevant sector in order to progress with the application. Those who have defense and aerospace related applications or digital systems and software, please note that for defense and aerospace, if it's a defense sector application, it will not be encouraged and it will be deemed ineligible. Your focus must be on the commercial aspect of it. And for digital systems and software, it has to be a part of a physical sciences fund program. Like for instance, in AgTech, if you're backing up your technology with digital systems and software, if it's a purely digital and software application like blockchain or cybersecurity, those applications are deemed ineligible. That's essentially my presentation. Just want to let you know that the Medical Devices Fund, for those who have medical devices, it's currently open, the 2023 round, and those who are at quite early stage with their application, the minimum viable product MVP ventures is also open if you'd like to apply. And also, I'd like to point you towards the New South Wales Grants and Funding Finder program that's recently been launched. So all you need to do is search on Google and just go to the website and type in keywords of your technology just for you to find out if there are other avenues for you to apply. And with regards to contacting us, you can go to this link and fill up the form, and that'll put all your inquiries through to us. And yeah, that's it from me.
Great, Jaren, thank you. And taking yourself off screen share. That's great. Wonderful. You know, as you see, this is really quite generous money, if you will. I think the single tranche, no equity, no matching, like it's really hard to come by. So a really fantastic scheme. It's also, you know, oftentimes researchers are kind of sitting on the edge to think, you know, should I spin this out as a new venture, or you know, what should the vehicle look like? And, you know, receiving funding like this could be the impetus for, you know, push you over the edge to think about creating a new venture. And Jaren, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you were successful for the Physical Sciences Fund, as Lewis was, you can also apply for this fund. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, if are you sorry, so your question if a funding recipient who's been successful once can apply again?
Yeah, that's right. For a different project, probably.
Yeah, and for the same project as well. What the panel will look is, for instance, Lewis would have in his application submitted, you know, what his timeline was and what he was going to do with the PSF project. And so once he crosses that threshold, and so, you know, he can apply again. He's welcome to apply again, and I hope you do, Lewis. But yeah, that's what the requirement is. So all they need to do is demonstrate that they have progressed as per they have indicated in their application.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. Up next, we have Lewis Collins, who, as I mentioned, is the co-founder and CEO of BioScout. Lewis, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit first about BioScout, about the business, before we kind of get through the details?
Yeah, so I guess BioScout started from my doctorate research at the University of Sydney when I was looking at building, I guess, aerobiological sensors for wheat diseases in the wheat belt of New South Wales. We were lucky enough to get some funding and from some angel investors, and I guess BioScout started by commercializing the sensor that we built so it can pick up all the kind of airborne particulates that we're breathing in, anything from about 1 micron to 100 microns, and we mainly focus on fungal pathogens, the spores, so things like wheat rust or powdery mildew or botrytis. And we use that information, combine it with the weather data that we've added to the sensor, and what we can do is then give growers a warning about diseases and outbreaks on their fields. There's a few other use cases in different verticals. We're starting to do some work in pollen and allergy forecasting, as well as some defense applications too. So it's been a bit of a journey. We've kind of gone from just me doing my doctorate and a few other honours students. We've now got a team of 17 staff. We've raised a couple of $1 million. We're generating about $1 million in revenue. So it's all going really well. Just expanded to New Zealand, about to do Canada. So yeah, I think the PSF grant was really one of those early key parts of BioScout. That funding really allowed us to get some venture capital funding to kind of commercialize our kind of prototypes. So I think it was a really, really important grant for BioScout, and I think it was really impactful. So that's why I don't mind spending quite a bit of time talking the benefits of.
Yeah, brilliant. And can you talk about the project that it supported? I mean, obviously BioScout is a company, you had a first product, but can you tell us how, I guess, specific the project was, or tell us a little bit about kind of what the project was and what this funding kind of unlocked for the project?
Yeah, for sure. So the PSF was really about two things. It was about finishing a group of field trials we're running for our sensors to get some commercial use cases and data from. And then secondly, it actually allowed us to do our design for manufacture process, which is, taking it from a prototype that works once in the lab, which is great, for research and my PhD, thank God. But actually getting it to work every day on farms with a fleet of units across Australia, at a price point that was reasonable and also didn't take 60 hours of my time to put together. So that was what the PSF allowed us to do. And basically that step, that design for manufacture, is a huge roadblock for investors, particularly in Australia, where they see this huge capital investment that has to go into a research project to bring it into the commercial world. And that's a big sticking point. And the PSF basically allowed me, and actually a few other of those companies, which I know quite well, allowed us to get past that almost valley of death, that roadblock, and get to the next stage where we could become commercial and actually get the venture capital to unlock kind of the growth stages where all those companies are now in.
That's great. I didn't realize that you used some of the funding for kind of proof, in these field trials. That's really fantastic. Sharon, I don't know if you can kind of maybe pop off mute for a second, but can this funding cover things like clinical trials?
Yeah, I believe so. So trials are, those would be early requirements for a company to establish some key evidence to support the claims that they make, and I think with clinical trials particularly, it's quite an expensive process that takes a while. So that is something that they can include as in a sector where they will use some of the funding ask. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, I guess that was really commercial proof points. So it wasn't so much the scientific evidence, it was proving return on investment so that we could actually sell it to customers with,
Absolutely. And I think I alluded this earlier in an earlier slide, the area where an university application sort of struggles is to understand that the PSF and the BioSF is a commercialization program, and the focus is squarely on the commercialization aspect. So it all through your application and all through your funding ask and everything, that aspect should be highlighted. That it needs to show confidence to the assessor that that's where your end goal is, not to develop, confirm your research, or not to, just focus on the R&D aspect as opposed to, like the other grants that university applicants tend to apply. So just if as long as you get that aspect of your application right, it almost always helps an application to get to the next level. And there's progressively there's a few rounds that they'll have to cross until this final stage.
Great. And what, Louis, you talked a little bit about this, but can you tell us a little bit about the funding that you received prior to the Physical Sciences Fund, and if this funding kind of helped specifically unlocked other funding, or was it kind of just the story? And this is for two reasons. One, to kind of give people kind of a sense of kind of when this funding is, I guess, a sweet spot for a new venture, but also kind of to open up, to bring visibility to some of the funding opportunities out there.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, we had got about $300,000 of angel investment at that point through an incubator and a few independent angel investors. So it wasn't much funding really for the deep technology that I'm sure everyone in this call actually is doing. And yeah, we were really struggling to get the next round of funding together to allow us to go from kind of a prototype, which 300 grand had got us to, but really we needed much more to bring it to something we could sell and actually start generating regular revenue. We were really lucky that we had some revenue from customers that actually just really believed in the vision, and they bought it pretty much sight unseen and actually were part of the PSF trials that we did. But yeah, I guess that was that angel round, and then we had a little bit of grant money, not much, maybe another 100,000. And yeah, so it was very, very tightly run ship in terms of capital expense. And yeah, as I mentioned, I think Australian venture capital does struggle. It just doesn't have the funds to put to these deep tech products, especially when I started BioScout when I was pretty young. I think it was hard for them to see how to get to that next stage. And yeah, I guess the PSF allowed us to jump over that hurdle really well. And the year after, we raised another $1.5 million, using the results of the PSF. We got the accelerated commercialization grant. We've just raised another 2 million. So yeah, I think it really helped us get past that stage, which I think a lot of Australian technology companies get stuck at. So it's well designed for that.
And can you tell us a little bit about the application process and why you think BioScout was successful? If you have any insight into that?
Not really. I guess I haven't gone deep into the committee and asked. I think we hit that sweet spot of kind of something coming from a research and had some scientific backing and really was quite inventive and novel. We had the patents sorted at that point as well. And then, I think we also had that commercialization mindset because we just had to, there was no, as a PhD student, I couldn't get access to any research funding and, I had to look for other sources. So we had always had to think about kind of commercialization as quickly as possible. Like we were always making revenue as a business, not much, but we were. And I think that allowed us to be that sweet spot for the PSF. And then I guess we also didn't ask for too much either. Like, I think we've always been pretty efficient using grants and capital, so I think that also helped as well.
Great. And I just have one final question, and if anyone has any questions, they can pop it in the chat. You talked a little bit about your funding, but what other kind of University of Sydney resources or external resources did you take advantage of, particularly in the early days of BioScout?
Well, except for the Sydney Knowledge Hub, which, we were right there at the beginning, and, that gave us some professional space to work out of instead of the basement at uni. That was really, really amazing to have. And I think that was a big part of it. We did incubate as well, which really, I was lucky enough during my PhD to actually meet those guys. And that's where, I actually even got the idea that you could commercialize your research. So that was really helpful too. And then Inventing the Future with Marianne Large and Andrew Harris, they both really helped us think about some of the commercialization aspects as we grew into more of a business. Yeah, so I think those were the main groups, all including just the community in general. Like the innovation community is very strong and very passionate at USyd. So I think that was really good too. Cicada, which is a bit to the side of USyd, but we also were part of that community too, which helped. So yeah, we pretty much used every resource available, I think, university.
Great. Yeah, and we all loved helping you because you have always given back to the community. So that sort of help, I think, goes two ways. Everybody on this call, and just to let you know, so Inventing the Futures is a curriculum, a multidisciplinary postgrad curriculum around developing an idea and a business for an invention. But Incubate is available. It's our on-campus incubator that's available for researchers here at the University of Sydney and others, alumni and current students. And we have increasingly it's supporting more and more research-led businesses. Does anyone have any questions? It's not very like this sort of community not have any questions, and you can also pop yourself off mute if you'd like. No questions?
I think Nicholas, go on.
Defeating myself. Could I jump in, Rupal, and ask a question?
Please, Nick, go.
Awesome. Thank you so much for putting this together, and thank you, Lewis and Jaren, for fantastic talks and introducing this. I did just want to jump back to the question related to clinical trials, because I was interested in potentially doing GMP manufacturing, or whether or not this would be manufacturing need to be done within. Oh.
Nick, we lost you, but you're talking about GMP manufacturing. Give it one more go, and otherwise type it in. Nope. Not getting you. Do you want to type it in? Maybe while Nick's doing that, we can jump in with another question.
Josh, you're on mute.
Yeah, Josh, we can't hear you. I don't know if anyone, Liz, could you hear Josh?
No.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Sorry. I actually had the same question to that other guy.
Yeah.
And so I could potentially ask it a different way. So we're also moving down the path of clinical trials. And so there's several stages before a clinical trial, which are IND enabling studies, GMP synthesis, and GLP tox. These are things that we will absolutely do. And the question would be, would we do them in New South Wales? And so I just was wondering if we could ask that question around, you know, the way the documentation is worded. It's sort of to fund something that would otherwise not get funded through other means. We would absolutely do that, but we wouldn't do it in New South Wales. So would that sort of activity qualify? Thank you.
Thanks, Joshua and Nicholas, for those questions. So the truth is that it will be for the assessment panel, and so either for the subcommittee or the expert panel to determine if this is acceptable. So when you are submitting your funding ask, and you are also elaborating on what portion of the project will be spent, you know, with regards to the funding. So if you're saying that this aspect of your project, you're going to do it anyways, and you're planning to do it outside New South Wales, then perhaps it doesn't need to be covered under your funding ask. But if that is something that you would like to utilize the PSF, sorry, the BioSF funding, it always, you know, one of the key selection criteria is the benefits to New South Wales, which, you know, includes, you know, creating jobs or manufacturing or, you know, conducting trials. So it will honestly depend on you as the applicant or as the business founder, leader, to determine how you want to progress your technology and how you want to conduct your business and how much of it you want to conduct in New South Wales. In certain cases, you know, the expert panel and the subcommittee do understand that sometimes, you know, New South Wales might not be the exact area because they might not have the capabilities for certain functions of a business. And in that case, you know, if at all you come to a section where you're invited for an interview, for instance, these questions will definitely come up. And then, you know, you will be asked, okay, can you elaborate on why you're planning to conduct this? Or, you know, what is stopping you from conducting this in New South Wales? Or is there a way we can merge the two? So yeah, that's my answer really, because this new subcommittee and expert panel that we are setting up, and unfortunately it hasn't been announced because this is the first year. We're in the process of finalizing everything as we go along. But that is one of the key, you know, they will also, at the end of this year, they will also give us a stronger indication of, you know, if we need to update the guidelines in any way, like you've said, you know, just to fine tune the words a bit or add key information, particularly with regards to some of the questions that you're raising, and also recurring themes in the application. But ideally, yeah, it should, you know, the point of the fund is, you know, for New South Wales based organizations to bring benefits to New South Wales and to hopefully keep your company in New South Wales for a long time.
Great. We're going to go to two questions from the chat. I think they're quick ones. So Megan's asking, do unsuccessful applications get feedback from assessors?
I was just noting that question just for my own information.
Sure.
And yeah, absolutely. Not from directly from assessors, no, but you will get feedback from me. For instance, you know, I think I might have spoken to a couple of people from the University of Sydney in the past couple of years. So what I do is, I organize. So if you get the unsuccessful letter from the office, and you're working to get feedback, we set up a meeting. And prior to the meeting, I'll just compile all the information about the application, and just go through what worked and what didn't work, what impressed the subcommittee or the expert panel, and what sort of feedback do they have. So we'll compile all that information, share it with you, and essentially also take you through general themes of what makes a successful application, so that you have a good sense of understanding of the key areas you need to focus if you are interested in applying again.
Great. And Ria has a couple questions. One is, would biomedical device hardware improvements still be eligible? And then she's also asking about, well, go ahead and answer that question. I'll ask the second one afterwards.
If it is a medical device, then I believe the right funding is the Medical Devices Fund. So you will have to strongly clarify why it wouldn't be covered under the Medical Devices Fund, or elaborate on the themes of the BioSF, where we request the sector and the area, and then in your answers also elaborate on why it falls under the BioSF and why you need support from the BioSF program.
Great. And then Ria also asked, and an area that I also had a question on is, can you elaborate again on the repayment obligations?
Yeah. So I believe the repayment obligation at the moment for the contracts is a minimum value of $500,000 that you in revenue that you earn from your project. So once you reach that cumulative earning, and then once you reach that threshold of success that is laid out in the contract, again, these are the final bits of one, and that is, so what, okay, so just on the, after you submit all the applications and you become a funding recipient, what happens is that the same external financial advisor that you was a part of the program, we will enter into an ROI discussion with you, which is a return on investment analysis, where they go into, so, Lewis and BioScott have gone through this process where we sit with you. I mean, you're required to submit information, you map out how your future will look like, best case, worst case scenarios, and then we sort of look at the financial advisor will prepare an ROI profile, which goes into the contract, and then it's signed by you and signed by the department. Anyways, and then as part of annual reporting requirements, you will be submitting, how you've been tracking your financial statements and things like that. And then we sort of will catch up with you to see how you're tracking. And then only once you start earning revenue from the project and it triggers that minimum threshold that's stated in the contract, then we'll start calculating the repayment obligations. But again, that's for a successful company, that's to be in that, to reach that point is actually a great thing, because it just shows that you've managed to take something that was, like Lewis said, the valley of death situation. You've gone from there to where you've successfully raised more money, you've hired people, you've started making you started manufacturing, you started selling, and you've started earning income. It's just it's a long way ahead for a typical PSF process or BioSF program.
If you don't reach the threshold, you pay nothing, and if you are above the threshold, then you just pay it back dollar for dollar.
So that will be calculated by the financial advisor, what the value is, which will be your repayment obligation, but you don't repay the whole amount in one go. So you just, it will be monthly repayment or yearly repayment, which you'll calculate.
It's getting a bit advanced, but I'd also just say it actually works really well in terms of tax and carry forward losses and things like that. So investors also look favorably on this grant because you don't have to pay tax on it, and actually it helps with your tax bill moving forward through the years. So it's very effective in that sense as well.
Great. Glenn, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Yeah, look, it might be a silly question, but just looking at the timescales of application to granting, it looked like it was, heading upwards of a year. What we might spend money on right now is potentially not what we might spend the money on in 12 months' time. but it sounded like the applications were pretty specific in sort of saying, it's got to be spent like this, this, and this. And I'm just wondering, is that true, or is it a case of, there's some degree of being able to pivot on how the money is spent during the, if things change during the process of application?
During the process of application, yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that will typically happen is at this stage, because the preliminary application, we are asking June 2023, like what will you do with regards to the fund from June 2023 onwards? But once you progress to that stage, it will give you a chance, because we go into a lot more detail, and the expert panel might invite you for an interview, and the independent financial advisor will get in touch with you and will work with you to see what your plans are. And that will give you a chance to fine tune the plan, and for the funding, just work out how or where you want to fund the program from next year onwards. So we will be building this process up as we go. And then there's a second part to it too, which is like, you when you enter a contract with us, you are saying that, okay, in the next 24 months or so, these are the areas where we will spend the BioSF fund or the PSF. But chances are that things don't exactly go like planned. Lewis can attest to, if there was an impact from COVID on the business, if things slow down because of that, or because of the semiconductor issue, the chip issue, where, supply and demand just became a big issue and things like that. And if at all something like that happens as well, that's what we are there for. We provide support to you throughout the process, many years after being a funding recipient. And we can always vary the contract, update the contract. You inform us of major pivots that if you're undertaking any, and if there are any significant changes to the core team and things like that. It's all part of the kind of support. It's long term. We don't expect, particularly for biosciences, it will take a while before, for the PSF, it might be slightly faster, maybe, hopefully. But we understand that this is where we are entering in the life cycle, or in the commercialization pathway of your project. There's several years ahead where we start recognizing revenue from it.
Yeah, right. And just one sort of follow-on question, I suppose, if I can. And what if, I suppose, there was a scenario wherein we were able to get enough funding, I suppose, to get through like a core aspect of the project going forward, but at the same time, identified there was a number of other things that we could do and would really like to do, but didn't have the funding for that, such that a grant like this would really enable expansion into areas that otherwise would not have been possible. Is that still within the scope?
It depends on where you're going to spend that funding. So, I wouldn't provide a general answer to that question, but it could be different for different companies. So we do specify, like in the slide you saw that, I do specify a few areas where you can utilize the funding, which generally covers a lot of, what is significantly part of a company's requirement. But if there are other sections which are not elaborated there, then you can mention that in your application. We would also like to use the funding for this. I don't think we'll have the funding, or we might find funding for that sector, so the BioSF can really help us. And if that is acceptable to the assessment panel, and they think that that's where New South Wales government's money can be used, it's a valid requirement, then they'll only be happy to support it. But if you say that we need to use it for marketing, they might say no. It just depends on what you are going to use the fund for.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
And then Nick had a follow-up question. Are you able to use the funding for work in national facilities that aren't necessarily based in New South Wales?
I wouldn't be able to say yes or no to that question, unfortunately, because that is a very targeted question. That is something that they can state in their application or in the interview process, and then they can see how the expert panel or the assessment panel takes it. Because chances are that, depending on the kind of application and depending on the capabilities that New South Wales has to offer, they might either suggest, why don't you try this, for instance, or have you thought about and this is speaking from experience. I've always seen, particularly with interviews, they ask questions or they try to identify these areas, these gaps that an applicant probably hasn't considered. But for specific areas like that, that would be something that you can highlight in an application and see the kind of feedback you get from that.
Great. Lewis, Megan's asking, do you have any tips for anyone thinking of writing an application?
Yeah, it's actually been a while now. I think we wrote ours in was it 2020? So a long time ago now. It does take a while. Like, it is a long application process. I would say it's pretty simple, and like the questions are well worded, at least when I did it. Yeah, again, I think it is. Yeah, that I think the trip for most researchers would be that commercialization question, and like making sure you've talked. We had evidence of like 50 customer interviews. We had proof of like customers saying they paid for it, that they're interested. And I think all those things really helped. I think, yeah, like we had all the scientific input pretty well done. Like, we'd done a lot of grants previously that were more directed towards the research angle, but yeah, I think about that. And then, yeah, the panel, I think the panel was the most intense part. It was the first in-person event I went to after like the first COVID lockdown. It was I think being prepared for that and just being humble about not knowing things that, you don't know. And like, I think it's almost, that's part of it too, is showing a capacity to take the feedback from the committee, both rounds, and like changing the application. I think actually that was some feedback I got, was the fact that we showed adaptability based on the feedback we got. So yeah, those would be my suggestions.
One of my favorite photos of the Sydney Knowledge Hub is a photo of Lewis and him, his co-founder at the time, who came in here right after they pitched, and they were just such relief on their face. Okay, well, I think that's it. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thanks, Jaren, for holding this specifically for this community. I know that you're probably doing a few of these. And Lewis, of course, thanks for coming. You had no really reason to come other than to giving back. So really appreciated that. We have a few other events coming up, mostly for UCID researchers. One is an Ask Me Anything with the UniSeed, who is a venture capital partner of the universities, with Melissa Mail. We have an event coming up on Accounting and Cash Flow 101 with Guy Ford, who is the director of our MBA program that's specifically aimed for startups. And we have FCW Lawyers, who's going to be running a session called What's a Company and How Do I Set One Up? So Carla is going to either pop them into the chat. We'll also be sending a follow-up email to everyone on here with the PowerPoint that Jaren presented. So thank you, everybody, and good luck if you're applying. Bye.
All the best, everyone. Cheers. Thank you. Thanks, Rupal. Hey, Rupal, just really quickly. So can I just send you the information session tomorrow link anyways? And